Well, welcome everybody to our Judging 101 for Dairy. This is the last of our series that we're going through, and we're going to talk about, to me, the most exciting one is the dairy industry and getting kids involved in dairy judging. We started this series with a bunch of extension staff and in the state of North Dakota, and listed there just some of the names that have contributed to the program. And like I said, we've got a great team that works together with a lot of our livestock projects up here in the state of North Dakota, and we're very fortunate to have that. Focusing on dairy cattle, and I hope everybody can see the screen, but what we're going to do tonight is go through like the contest rules and some resources that we have available to coach some of the kids. And I'm going to say that dairy judging, we have Eric and Kim on from the southern part of the United States. What's nice about the dairy industry is that we basically have one set of standards, and that set of standards has not changed since I was a kid. And it's been, quality of dairy cattle is still the same. And the other thing that's not changed, and that it makes it easier to coach teams, and that is the way that we give reasons with dairy cattle. The national contest is always at World Dairy Expo, and we know that we give reasons on cows. In the 4-H side, and so it really makes it pretty simple. We're going to talk about what those reasons formats look like, what some expectations are for kids who want to give a set of reasons in dairy cattle judging. We do have a class or two of for you guys to test your dairy judging skills, and then maybe some other recruitment strategies and questions and answers for you guys when we get into that part of the presentation. We'll talk a little bit about the North Dakota version of how we run our dairy judging contest in the state of North Dakota. But in the end, no matter where you are at from across the country, most people send their teams to World Dairy Expo at Madison, Wisconsin towards the end of September. And that contest is basically for according to their rules, if you turn 15, 16, 17, 18, or 19 during the year of the contest, you're eligible to participate in that national contest. In North Dakota, we do have just 2 age divisions for youth to be able to participate in that contest. At our state level, we basically have either 5 or 6 classes at our state competition. It's universal across the country, but each class is worth 50 points per class. And so if you've got 5 classes, that's 250 points in placing. If you have a 6-class contest, that will get you to 300 points. Again, each class is going to consist of 4 animals. And the part that is different with judging dairy cattle is that heifers are broken down into a lot more close age groups than what you would see in a livestock contest. If you have like yearling beef heifers or something, those are all born in the spring. And so with dairy, they might be winter yearlings, they might be spring calves. It could be basically anywhere from maybe 4-month-olds to just about 2-year-olds, and they would be judged as heifer classes. Cow classes, again, we can have 2-year-olds up to aged cows. And the strategy or the criteria and the way that you place those classes, no matter if they're heifers or cows, is relevant to the age of the class. And so we will talk a little bit more about that when we get into actually placing classes. Reasons are very similar to any other contest that you'd participate in, whether it's livestock judging or, I guess any of the other ones there as well. If you get into even meats judging, I'm thinking that they still run on the 50-point scale there. Mm-hmm. So you get 50 points for a perfect set of reasons. The nice thing, like I said, about judging at World Dairy Expo or at the national competition is you will always give reasons on the cow classes, never on heifer classes. Now, if you get into FFA, or if you're going to judge at the college level, you'll have to learn how to give reasons on heifers as well. But in this scenario, learn the cows and learn the parts and what's important, and reasons become relatively simple. Officials will designate which classes at the beginning of the contest, or maybe as the contest goes on, which will be the classes that you would give a set of reasons on. It has changed sometimes during a contest. If you get an unruly cow or something that shows up lame the morning of the show, they might decide to use a different class to give for the youth to give reasons on. Basically, whatever state you're from, there's your state official dress that's required at any state contest. Basically, you don't want to have representation from your 4-H club or your state at a state contest. And other than that, each state kind of has their own set of guidelines as to what official dress code is. When we get into placing classes, traditionally we will give 12 minutes to place non-reasons classes or heifer classes. And then it's 15 minutes to judge and take reasons on or take notes on all of the cow classes. When we get into giving the reasons, the officials will always give you about 20 minutes in preparation to study your notes, to kind of prep your reasons for presentation. And I think 20 minutes is sufficient, even if you do have a smaller contest. Again, the officials will give you that amount of time. Much like any other set of reasons that you would be in other contests, is that 2 minutes is a long time. And if you're going to talk more than 2 minutes, you're probably putting a lot of information in there that's not correct. And it will actually hurt your set of reasons if you're going to talk beyond, let's say, even a minute and a half. Dairy judging reasons are, I would say, they're unique in the fact that there's more emphasis placed on accuracy than there is on presentation sometimes. We don't use a lot of filler words in dairy cattle judging. Basically, you will also remember that you always talk the way that they are. There's no future projections about what this dairy cow might do for her offspring. There's no, you don't really talk about EPDs in dairy judging. It's, you see a cow class, you tell me what you see, and I think it makes taking notes and giving reasons a little bit easier. So it does change the way that our reasons sound. You will not go in and, like I said, make any projections. Or also, the one thing that is a little bit unique about dairy judging when you start giving reasons is that you never really, you always want to make the person taking the reasons feel like the class is really of good quality. That you don't criticize, and we'll get into that here when we talk about reasons as well. In the contest, basically, it's like any other state contest. No electronic devices, no extra notes are allowed, no talking while the contest is taking place. Once you get into the class, you basically turn your back to the class until the officials call time in, and then you get your 12 minutes for heifer classes and 15 minutes for cow classes. In the state of North Dakota, we do two different things with our dairy judging contest. Is that the FFA kids usually will judge with a Scantron sheet. We're a little bit old school yet. Maybe we'll change this year. We don't know, but we fill out Scantrons for FFA, but the 4-H side is still filled out the handwritten judging card with all of your placings on the side, and you hand in a card after each class. No matter what you decide to do in your own state, is that you do have to know how to fill out the Scantrons and fill them out accurately. Basically, when we've learned how to use these Scantron machines, each contest basically has to have its own sheet designed for the way that contest will be run. So, make sure that if you are going to run a contest in dairy judging and use the Scantrons, that you order the correct Scantron sheets in advance. Other than that, it's pretty much straightforward.
And how do you prepare? Rick, I might jump in there if you want to go back one slide. And for you coaches, that you probably already do this, but really being cautious of practicing and teaching your youth the various 1, 2, 3, 4 variations, because sometimes that can be scary. And if a kid gets to a contest and they've never filled out a judging card before, that can be super confusing and intimidating. So I put a link in there to print out a copy of a Scantron if you wanted to use those, or you can Google placing cards and print those out for the kids to use so they get familiar with just doing that. And then Rick, I have a really good question from Eric, and he was wondering if you can explain expected progeny differences in dairy cattle. And like EPDs, kind of how I don't know if you guys usually get a data sheet like in the livestock judging contest or how that works.
That's a very good question. Thanks, Leanne. I'll try to answer a couple of questions there. Eric, your comment on EPDs, traditionally FFA will get you like DHIA material, and it's called a sire selection. So you might have to go back and read, like you get 4 bulls, and you have to select the bull that you're going to mate these cows to that's going to take your program in the right direction. And so maybe it's on milk volume, it might be on butterfat content, it might be on feet and legs. But I would say a lot of times you want to look to see what your scenario is. And then there's a lot of acronyms for FFA kids when we get into doing sire selection in dairy cattle evaluation. On the 4-H side, we don't have any EPDs. You will never get a scenario, and we really don't have a test, a dairy test that you would take, unlike what you would have to do in an FFA dairy judging contest. I don't know if that answers your question, but what we do on the FFA side is that we have available the previous 3 years tests for the youth to study from. And so that actually gives you a lot of the potential questions that could be on that exam. Then again, like I said, 4-H doesn't do that. Leanne, you bring up a really good point about the use of Scantrons. I think there's one thing I probably should have mentioned too, is that if your state does decide to use Scantrons, you have to know what your county number is, and you have to know how to fill all that stuff out prior to getting to a contest. And so when we do practices, I actually like to have the kids use a Scantron sheet at practice, and I'll randomly say, well, this is class 3, and I want to make sure those kids know how to find the line for class 3 on their Scantrons and make sure that they fill them out correctly. So that's a really good point that you bring up, Leanne. Basically, you're going to need to know your chapter or your county program number. And then some counties or some states will actually have you fill in whether you're a junior, intermediate, or senior member too. And so basically getting familiar with the Scantrons can be important prior to any contest. So very good point.
Thanks for explaining that, Rick.
The resources that are available, I would say that in the last 5 years, there has been a lot more sample sets of reasons that have shown up on, your Googles and your Facebooks and all that kind of stuff. And so prior to that, I would say prior to 2017, I never really ever heard a set of reasons from dairy. I knew what to expect, but from the horde side, they actually have started to record some of the youth, and they've put their recordings of like some of the national high scores on the hordes dairy judging. If you just go ahead and Google, dairy judging, you'll get some of those classes to show up, as well as some really good sets of reasons. Now we have some people from South Carolina and Alabama on, and I really like that. What is nice about the way that the dairy contest is run is that if you get on a list, the Hordes Dairy will actually send you practice contests for your kids to, kind of do a pre-contest off of paper, and you can send that in. And what I have done over the last many, many years, I always keep those copies, but that's what we use to study dairy cattle. Even if you don't have a lot of dairy producers in your area where you can go out and judge a lot of live cattle, these Hordes contests are phenomenal. And the nice thing is that once you get into the sequence of it, they always give you the official set of reasons on the previous year's contest. And like for the picture that we have here is that the winners that you see on the 2020 on this page are the winners in each breed from the 2021 contest. And if you flip into that next page, it gives you all the animals and the official set of reasons and the cuts and all that stuff. And let's say that you did enter the 2021 contest, you can go in and score yourself then and know exactly how your team would have placed the class, how accurately you were. We do have other resources out there. We use the livestockjudging.com, and that's got all of the contests on there. Basically, there's the pig, sheep, beef, swine, goats, dairy. There's meats on there. There's some horse classes on there as well. It's really a very, very good resource to have access to. I think there's maybe like 20 some dairy classes that are on there. Some people may want to go up to the judgingpro.com. Again, it's an annual subscription to that website. And again, if you start coaching a lot of different teams, really the cost becomes almost insignificant because there's so many classes that are available on those sites. And they do give official placings on a lot of those, as well as some reasons there too. Again, the Hordes Dairyman is available. I think you just need to get on their mailing list, and once you return one of the contests, then you're always on their mailing list. So it's great. It's a great thing to use. Also, if you just go on and Google dairy cattle judging, the Hordes contest actually has been putting on the 2013, 14, 15 classes, and they're all on there with official written reasons, not necessarily the verbal reasons on there too. So there are some really good resources available. Again, the YouTube videos, we do have one in here, that kind of goes through what is the process of evaluating heifers. Trying to remember her name now, but I will get into that here in just a little bit. But other than that, evaluation, we have a livestock NDSU extension live animal evaluation sheet that we've got in print. And then also we do have the paper classes like with the Hordes Dairy Contest. To learn more about, some of the details and get into the anatomy and some of the things about, how milk is produced and the science side of it, you can look into the Ohio Learning Kit there as well. I also think that no matter what contest it is, kids like to be able to see live classes if it's an option. If you have a dairy farmer that's in the area, ask them if you can set up a couple of classes. And I think that the kids actually learn better by seeing it, firsthand, if at all possible. But that's not always possible with the reduction in dairies across the nation here as well. If you've had teams in the past, I still think that the best thing we can do as coaches is try not to be the expert in everything. And if you've got kids or some young adults that are willing to come back and work with kids that may have gone to World Dairy Expo or maybe participated in the college dairy cattle judging events, I think use those resources that you have in your communities. The nice thing about the dairy industry is that we have a unified scorecard that is universal no matter where you're at in the world. I sat through a session for the coaches when we were at World Dairy Expo, probably back in about 2017. And it was a guy from Canada that came in and he talked about how to show cattle. And he said, there is a universal way you show dairy cattle, no matter if you're from Switzerland or, Canada or the United States or wherever it is, everybody does it the same. And that's what I like about dairy judging. See if I can go back here. And so when we look at dairy cows, they break it down according to points that are attributed to each part of the animal. Frame is 15%. Basically, heifers, you might be able to get a little bit more accurate to just, place them on frame. On cows, there's more important things than just how big they are. A term that we did change, I would say maybe 5-6 years ago, is we used to call it dairy character. Now it's called dairy strength. It's how good that dairy animal structure is, how strong their top lines are, how big their ribs are. Their dairy strength is basically an indication of freeness of fat. I try to teach different things when I teach dairy judging too. I try to explain like why are dairy cows so skinny? And the bottom line is that if you have a fat cow in the dairy world, it is a pretty good indication that she's not a very good milker. And so you don't want to have cows that are carrying excess condition. We talk about what the importance of depth of barrel is. Why do we want a cow that's got a deep rib? And basically what it means is that she's got the opportunity to take in more feed, to convert more energy into more milk. And so we talk about why these things are important, not just the fact that we want a cow with a lot of depth of rib, depth of forerib, depth of rear rib, and that type of thing. No indications of where animals start to put condition on. And usually it's their thighs. We want a nice incurving thigh. We don't want to see an animal that's, like I said, maybe putting on what we would consider more meat. That's just not an indication of high quality dairy strength. They need to be sharp over their withers. And so we do talk about identifying body parts on dairy cows. I think when you get into giving a set of reasons, you want to describe where this cow is exhibiting dairy strength. She's cleaner through her crops. She's got a more incurving thigh. She's flatter in her bone work. She's stronger down her top line, things like that. We want to get into where she's better because in dairy judging, we don't have a ton of things to talk about. So we get into the rear legs, which is going to be 20%. And so what do good legs look like? And I think that just comes from experience. You want to see them have a pretty deep heel. You want to see them walk with some strength up in their front end. We need to have them move free and easy with not a lot of, swelling or inflammation in their hocks or their knees or that type of thing. They need to have long fluid strides. Their rear legs are somewhat, if you're a livestock judger, this gets a little bit more tricky, but we're not looking at base width. We're looking at how they put their feet to the ground. And when I was taught from a very young age, they said that you put an udder between those legs, she'll walk wider. So don't get so hung up on it. She's this wide, that's irrelevant. So then we get into the udder. And by all means, I think that this is where we need to learn about what quality really is about a mammary system. And 40% of dairy cow judging is based on mammary. And so that actually gets broke down a lot more in detail. So udder depth is worth 10 points of that 40%, or that 40 points that goes towards your total score. Your front, your fore udder is worth either 7 points or 10 points, depending upon which scale you want to use. Rear udder is 9 points. Udder cleft, basically having some definition, a strong medial suspensory ligament that divides that mammary system in half. That you see that crease in there instead of having it smooth is worth X number of points as well. Texture of the mammary system. Basically what that means is that I try to describe it this way. If you took that udder and you popped it like a balloon, does it shrivel up to nothing, or is there a lot of edema left in there, or a lot of, I'm going to say it almost looks like extra fat within that mammary system. So you want to see it pliable to where it's actually going to shrink up. And so you can see that by the folds in the mammary system. And the texture, if it's a soft, pliable texture, that's actually a good indication. Fore and rear udders, like I said, they're usually 7 points each. And so what does a good fore udder look like? It needs to be well attached. So how do you determine whether a fore udder is well attached? If you see a cow walk and that fore udder is moving on the body wall, it's probably not snugly attached. You want to see them long. And so basically from front teat on forward, you want to see more length there. So basically we kind of get into, just knowing what's right or knowing what the ideal is, and then try to find the cow that most exemplifies the ideal and describe the positive attributes of each of those areas. In the end, there's, like I said, that's what's cool about dairy judging, is that you got a scorecard and it tells you where your emphasis needs to be placed. There are 7 breeds that are recognized at World Dairy Expo. The one that came in, not so long ago, and some people recognize it, some don't, but the red and whites are basically a red and white Holstein. And then you've got your traditional 6 dairy cattle breeds, the Ayrshire, the Brown Swiss, Guernseys, Holstein, Jersey, and the milking Shorthorns. I would say that, what's nice about dairy cattle judging is that, there are some breed character differences with them, but the quality and what we look for in those dairy cattle really does not change. Now, a Jersey's going to have a dished face, and she's going to be more moderate in her frame, and she's going to have some, actually they're going to have some genetic differences in them. They're a finer structured animal, and so they have a tendency to maybe blow out front shoulders or something like that. So we just watch for those things. The Guernsey has gotten to be, it's our old standard breed, but they're not the most structurally correct animal of the dairy breeds. And so, but you have to remember that how are they in relationship to the way other Guernseys are supposed to look? They're not going to be as fault-free from a structure standpoint as what a Holstein would be, or that type of thing. But kind of learn the differences. Here that kind of breaks down what are the breed characteristics of each breed. I would say that we do place a little bit different emphases on mammary system depending upon what breed it is. The Jerseys are going to have a lot, proportionately, they're going to have bigger mammary systems, especially when we get into like 3-4-year-olds and aged cows. They're a small cow and they produce a lot of milk for the size of animal that they are. But so we'll watch those things just a little bit. Basically look for different ID points. Know what are some of the points that you can actually disqualify an animal for. If they have a blind quarter, I guess if you look under udder, number 4, there are certain things that are minor infractions, minor discriminations, and then there's some that are serious to say that animal just, because she's got this problem, then she just needs to go to the bottom and then let's move on. Free Martin heifers, obviously, you'll never see a Free Martin heifer with an udder because they aren't going to breed. Okay, so, but anyways, we can look through those, and what's nice about this chart is it talks about how much emphasis we actually put on those different criteria. Also, when we get into the heifers, we have a unified scorecard for heifers too. And obviously there's going to be much more emphasis placed on the general appearance or the stature, the structure of that animal than what we would see in a cow, because we have eliminated 40% on mammary. So we need to place more emphasis in different areas. Again, they talk about the dairy character. We want to see them sharp, lean, incurving thighs, really prominent about their top lines. We want to see them look like girls up through their front end, long, clean necks, a wide muzzle, wide eyes, that, basically, are going to look feminine. We get into the rear legs. Again, it's about how those rear legs are positioned and how they move on their rear legs. It's not an issue of base width, but we can look to set to their hock. We can look to how their thurl is placed, and the thurl is supposed to be halfway between the pin bone and the hip. And as that thurl moves frontward or backward, it affects proportionately on how those feet are going to be positioned at the ground level. So if they're going to have too much set to their hock, it's all relative to where that thurl placement is within the structure of that animal. There is more emphasis placed on frame and size in heifers. The other thing to not do is to assume that an animal is younger. And when you get into a class, you're not going to be given information as to this is an October versus a December born, and maybe they're only, 9 months old, and 3 months can make a big difference when you're, a year old. You always assume that they are the same age. You can talk about youthfulness, but don't say the younger one in the class, because that's an assumption that you just don't know. Size makes a difference, and it's 20% of the placing criteria when we get into placing heifer classes. As a coach, how do you take notes when we get into dairy judging? I think, again, if we watch the horse series here, you can come up with acronyms of, what are my dairy strength? You could put DS. This one's got the advantages being, stronger over the chine bone, more prominent in her lines down her top, things like that. Come up with your own system. The one thing that I would say makes dairy cattle judging reasons easier is that we give a chart off to the left here about how you can set up your paper. But the criticism column is almost non-existent in dairy cattle. You do not go in and criticize somebody's dairy cattle and expect to get a good score. So it's basically a reason, a grant, and if you want to put in a minor fault within your reason itself, you can do that, but it's going to be minor. Even if you get to an animal that goes to the end of the class and maybe he's got some problems, you just basically go in and say she needs to have a higher quality mammary system to compete with the other ones above her, and you don't get in there and criticize, boy, she's blank in her quarter, she's ugly, she's got this dog-headed face. You will not do well if you do that, okay? We always teach our kids, to give a good opening statement about the generalization of the class. I like this outstanding class of 3-year-old Holstein cows, and then give your set of reasons. One wins this class because she's got this, this, and this. She's got the dairy strength. She's got the udder quality characteristics. Go through that. Yeah, you can give the advantage back to that maybe she is a bit taller at the top of her chine bone and more extended from hooks to pins, more level from hooks to pins. And that's it. Now you're on to your next pair. I think that the way we give reasons is you still need to be organized. You need to talk accuracy. You talk ID points. Give your reason, your grant. Like any other contest, prioritization is important. What is the one reason that you picked one to beat two? And if it's the most important thing, that should be what is said first. Then get into all the minor things a little bit later on in that particular pair. Transitions, obviously, we want you to have smooth transitions from your reason to your grant, and then do a voice fluctuation when you change from pair 1 to pair 2, so that the officials can follow along with you that now I'm moving into pair 2. Basically, power statements, you can use them. But remember, we've only got 4 things we're evaluating dairy cows on: mammary, feet and legs, frame, and dairy strength. Which one of those is the main reason why you like to place 1 over 2 power statements? You can find a fun way of saying that, but you still want to set your set of reasons apart from everybody else. You don't want to sound, repetitive of what everyone else teaches. So you find what works for you and what works for your kids. Visualize the class. I think up in this upper left-hand corner, you want to take notes. The predominantly white cow, or maybe the swollen hocked 4. You can talk maybe a little bit about that, or the blind quartered 4 if there's maybe something that's obvious that's going to help you remember what the class looked like. I think that does help you when you give your reasons in dairy cattle evaluation. No matter what set of reasons you're going to be giving, confidence is important. You want to be able to tell your story, be loud enough without being, I'm going to say, overwhelming in your reasons. At the North Dakota contest, we are giving reasons outside. There's a lot of traffic in the background, and so you want to make sure that the reasons taker can hear your comments. I still like visual eye contact. And as kids get more comfortable, they will, they will not be as intimidated to look somebody in the eye and say it the way they see it. You want a strong voice, dress appropriate. We joke around I would say that in the dairy industry, that the impression that you will get no matter where you're at is that those people usually are very, very well fit. You don't have to wear white pants anymore. That's kind of, a showing thing that used to be in play many years ago. Look professional. We joke around, you don't want hat head and you don't want to look like you just got out of bed, like 2 minutes before you went to the contest or whatever. Dress nice. Be on time for your set of reasons. Your reasons need to be, keep it flowing, be efficient, be concise and comprehensive in your set of reasons. Like what we talked about earlier, is that maybe about a minute 15 is a really good set of dairy reasons. So we get into the accuracy. I do think that the accuracy is more important in dairy cattle evaluation than they are in other species. And part of it is because we have so many fewer things to talk about. The light colored Guernsey, you can talk about. I think that just kind of gives a better picture to the reasons taker. You can talk about the strengths and weaknesses. Weaknesses are usually, we find ways that we talk about the strengths of this animal, which basically is saying that this animal is not as good. And so that's a difference between livestock judging and dairy cattle evaluation. Power statements, traditionally, I like to start the class with the one that best combines dairy's strength and udder quality. Okay, now we've given our power statement. Now we need to go back in and talk about what part of that dairy strength was better, where was the mammary quality better on this one, and those types of things. Basically, we can still get into good opening statement. I like the class of blue ribbon, 3-year-old Holsteins, this way, this way, this way. You'll still go through your reasons with a top, middle, and bottom decision. And again, we traditionally will say an advantage, a grant, and then let's be very careful about how we use that word criticism. In your last placed animal, you're going to give a minor criticism. There's a reason she's last, but it's not because she's, ready for the meat shop. Don't get that critical. And basically say, she needs to be better here, and therefore I place the class 1, 2, 3, 4. Or you don't have to state the placing at the end of dairy reasons anymore. They used to do that. Some still do. That's really a preference from where you are, what your state kind of considers to be most appropriate. Let's go ahead and try to judge a class. See if this is going to work. Okay. See if I can. I'm going to turn the volume down, and then we are going to get into. Can you guys all see that?
Looks good, Rick.
Let's just take a look at the class. What really are we looking for? You guys just take a few minutes. It will advance. I'm thinking it's advancing. Yep, it's advancing. And it'll give you just a few minutes. We've also talked about when we look at cattle is that do them one at a time. Is this a good dairy cow? And if she's good, what is good about her? Does she have good dairy strength? Does she have a good, powerful front end? Does she really level down her top from her chine bone back to her pin bone? What's her depth of forerib? rear rib? What's her mammary look like? Do you see a lot of milkiness to that mammary system? One thing that we've talked about in even our quiz bowl is that, and I think that I explained this to my kids, is that there was a trivia question of how many gallons of blood flow does it take through a mammary system to produce 1 pound of milk? And the answer, I believe, is 300 gallons to produce a pound of milk. So how do you determine whether or not an animal's got good blood flow? And that's through the venation through the mammary system. The more venation you see, the more milk or the more blood flow you've got, which is an indication of potentially more milk production. So we get into this cow. Is the white or the predominantly white cow, is she better than one in body strength, depth of heart, depth of forerib? What's her udder quality? Is it held high and snug in relationship to one or not? How's her foreudder? How's her rear udder? What's her levelness of udder floor? What's the texture of that mammary system in comparison to number one? We can also look from the rear view on your picture, either to the left or to the right. What is her depth of barrel? Does she have a lot of rib? Also, when the picture to the right here, you can look to see where that udder attaches in comparison to the hocks. Is it held high above the hock, or is it starting to have a weaker medial suspensory ligament where it's starting to weaken and soften up and fall below the hock? How does 3 compare? Again, let's go back through what's important. Your 4 criteria in placing dairy cattle. Mammary. Does she have a high quality mammary system that's held high, tight, wide? What's the foreudder? What's the rear udder? What's the pliability? What's the venation? What's the teat size and placement on the udder floor? And then let's go back and just take some notes and get a visualization as to how 3 compares to 1 and 2. Is she open in her rib, where you can actually see the ribs? Is she deep in her fore rib? Is she deep through her barrel? What's the strength in her top line? Look at the feet and legs. Again, we want to see those feet comfortable. Watch her when she walks. We want to see her move fluid throughout the arena. Okay, now let's go back to 4 and see what you guys think of her. Lumen capacity, fore udder, rear udder, levelness of udder floor, dairy strength. Is she long and clean through her front end? Is she deep in her heart? Is she deep in her barrel? Is she strong and prominent down her top line? Does she have clean incurving thighs? Ask yourself a few questions, make a couple notes, and once you think you've got a placing, if you can go ahead and, I can't see the chat box, but go ahead and put a placing into the chat box and let's see just where you guys are at with them.
Be brave. No wrong answers here. Great opportunity to learn.
Is it going to show all 4 of them together again?
It will, yes. Rear view, I believe yeah. Can you see the rear view now again?
Okay.
Yeah. Well, now I just see you, but that may be, I did that. I'm trying to watch this on a phone, so it's a little difficult.
It is hard to watch on phones. We got some guesses here, looking good. Looks like 1 is rising to the top on some of these cards and 2 is in the bottom pair.
Okay. And if you get them right, then you're classified as a dairy cattle judging expert and you're ready to go coach a team. Okay, Leanne, what do you got for, you said we got 1 on top and maybe 2 to the bottom.
Yep, and it looks like 3 and 4 as they flow on the middle. So that's kind of the consensus.
Kind of some toss-ups, okay? So that's perfect. Realistically, you guys are seeing them the way that they're supposed to be. And I'm probably going to stop this just a little bit and pause it for just a minute. When we take a look at these cows, basically, the size of udder does not determine their ability to produce milk. You want I'm going to say that where some kids get a little bit confused is that they see a big mammary system and they think she's going to produce more milk. And that's not really accurate, especially when we get into 2-year-olds. Usually it's a youthful udder that usually wins the classes. And that means that it's snug, it's well attached, and it has the ability to grow with that cow as she grows. But if you get a 2-year-old with a big mammary system, it's usually kind of like a bad sign. So know the parts. Here we got the medial suspensory ligament. Are her teats centrally located? Yep, they're pretty good. I like the way you guys, worked her to the top. It's not just because she's got a lot of fill to her middle. She's really good everywhere else too. High quality mammary. Teats are pointing inward a little bit, which is fine. You see a lot of venation. She's got a good, clean, incurving thigh. Her feet are perpendicular to the ground. She's flat in her bone work. You can see she's wide in her pins. She's wide in her hips, her hooks. She's got a lot of depth of barrel. That cow is one that I'm really glad that you guys had found. Did a nice job with that. This 2's mammary system is breaking down. Notice where it attaches. Here's the attachment, and it's the distance from the vulva to where that udder starts to kind of come out of the body wall of that animal is where we talk about the height of the attachment of the rear udder. And her udder is falling below the hock. And you don't see that crease. The medial suspensory ligament near as defined as what you're going to see in 3 or in 1. So you guys did an awesome job with placing the class. The official is 1, 3, 4, 2, and I can just kind of skim here and show you the cuts with that. And I'll let you listen to the reasons here then too.
I don't know why, Rick, but we're not hearing, or at least I'm not
hearing
anything.
Okay. And we're going to go on. I can hear it on my end. I apologize for that. I'm glad you told me. Okay.
And I'll drop the link in the chat box to that exact video. If you Google those, like Rick said earlier, there's all of those are on the Herdsman Dairy site as well.
Yep, that lady is Jan Knowlton from Virginia Tech, and she's got several videos that goes through like how do you evaluate heifers versus cows and that type of thing too.
So Rick, I have a really good question here, and it's very different with every kind of species contest. In a typical contest, will there be a definite 1st and 4th place like this class?
Oh, heavens, no. I would say the nice thing is that I actually did an article here about 2 weeks ago, and it's the importance of having, and it kind of fits into this next slide here too, but the importance of having youth and livestock projects. And we all go to contests, and very seldom does everybody or get a lot of 50s, or maybe they don't get any 50s. And what's really unique about that is you can go to have a committee of 5 officials, and the officials don't always agree. But that's it adds to the importance of why we actually do this, and that is that explain to me what you're looking at and what you're putting your emphasis on. I know we went into a contest last year, and I put the cow that they started with in 3rd place. Okay. I thought she's too heavy conditioned. I thought she was unbalanced in her mammary system. And, basically she had so much extra dairy strength and her body capacity and everything else was great. And so they placed more emphasis on the fact that she was so good everywhere else that they were willing to give up the fact that she was a little bit stale, and it was an aged cow class. They said, so udder isn't all that, as important as if they were a younger class. So granted, they placed more emphasis on one area than what I did, and we disagreed with it. And that's fine. But yes, I think the big thing is that we learn how to look at things, be able to determine the differences between animals. And at the end of the day, it's a learning experience. And So it kind of goes back to the recruiting side. You know, if you do have kids that are interested in livestock projects, I think it's easier to convince them to try dairy judging. But I will tell you that I've had multiple teams that have gone on to Madison, and very, very few of them come from a dairy background. And it's not always the kids that you would expect to do well that do well. If you can get a kid that has an interest in animals or interest in, you know, I'm going to say just going and meeting friends, it doesn't make any difference. You might be surprised on who would say yes if you ask them to try it. I do think that, you know, having some local workouts, I guess, if that's the right word for it, whether you get them into, actually, I've done this. I've actually taken those horse dairy contests and just give them to a 4-H club. And then after they're done, ask who's interested in giving it a try in person. And it, like I said, I am very surprised sometimes as to who says, yes, I'm willing to try it. But you have to ask. A lot of times, no matter what the contest is, you're going to have to go and ask them. They're not going to come knocking at your door. Basically have an introductory meeting, encourage them to participate. I coach a lot of different teams, not just dairy. I love coaching. And I tell people this, and if you've ever been around me, I've made this comment to many, many people. The best national contest is World Dairy Expo. And my question is why? I would say that it doesn't make any difference if you come from a cattle operation or you know, meats judge or whatever it is. World Dairy Expo is incredible because of the pride that the dairy people take in their business. And if you look at $1 million Holstein, even the people that raise Angus cows think that that's pretty cool to see $1 million cow. And you see a barn full of them. I mean, it's barns and barns and barns full of them. The presentation they give at World Dairy Expo is second to none of any national contest. I love it. From that standpoint, I think it really teaches kids about, you know, what the end goal is, and that is to go and experience some of the best in the world animals. And so whether it's dairy or whatever it is, get your kids involved. Basically bring it a friend, and I think it ends up being a very positive experience for everybody. I think you know, the other thing is that remember that we're not just here to learn how to judge dairy cattle. We're here to learn how to take notes. We're here to learn how to do visual observation of 4 items. And we talked about one of our earlier presentations. You can have a fun experience and make them judge 4 candy bars to get them comfortable with, you know, learning how to give reasons. And it might make more sense for them to start that way. And then basically the animal is just the avenue of how we teach the life lessons that we want to teach to kids. You can put together flashcards, you can give them quizzes. If you are very versed in dairy cattle, like I said, you can get into explaining, like, this is why the mammary system is important. And this is where milk comes from. You can kind of use it as a much bigger learning experience than just about, you know, placing animals 1 through 4. So I don't want to spend a lot of time because I want you guys to ask questions. Like I said, I thoroughly enjoy every judging contest, and to me, dairy is just an avenue for kids to go and experience some phenomenal animals at the highest level. So, all right, Leanne's got the question there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rick. And I did just launch a quick 2-question survey in the poll. So if you want to just take a few seconds to answer that certainly is helpful for us. And as we move forward and trying to replicate these, and maybe even have another type that's more for advanced. And I just want to echo some things, and I know Emily is on here, so if she wants to chime in too, just because if you weren't on our last webinar, she had some really wise words for coaches and just the impact that you guys get to have on those youth and our young leaders is so awesome. Like, it's such a privilege and honor to serve as a coach. I very much miss coaching. I coached the University of Florida horse judging team for 6 years. And it's just really neat to remember that, are those buckles and awards great? Absolutely. But they only collect dust. And just like Rick was talking about, there's so much more behind coaching. The life skills that we empower our youth through these opportunities are critical to their success in this ever-changing workforce. And so if we can provide them just some cultivation of a life skill to enhance that skill and really develop it, whether it's confidence, getting in front of a reasons taker is scary. We've all been there. But when they go into that interview for vet school, or they go in there for their first job to talk to somebody and shake the hands, they're going to be so much more confident after serving on a judging team. And you guys get to be a part of that lighting their path. So I'm just really proud of each and every one of you as a coach. And I just hope that you take that and really just know that you should be proud of yourself. It's an awesome opportunity. With that, I'm not seeing too many classes in here. Emily has a good statement here. We are finding another dairy class to redeem ourselves. So I was not paying good attention. I love it.
The technology that we have is so vastly different than what it was 5 years ago. The YouTubes and the Facebooks and what's on the internet right now on Google and stuff like that. There is a tremendous amount of free classes out there, whether it's through the reasons or the dairy cattle evaluation, understanding, like I said, how the mammary system works. It's incredible. I like I said, to me, the dairy cattle is an avenue to work with kids. Mm-hmm. And I'd say run with it. It's a great event.
Emily has a really cool statement, and I can echo this as well. She says, I love watching the light bulb moment when the kids finally understand what they're learning. That's just so cool to see.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Any other questions that you guys might have? If not, I hope that you've enjoyed it. Like I said, it's my perspective on how things are done, at least in the way I coach kids, and not saying that that's right necessarily, but I would say that the most successful teams all start with someone who's willing to coach and spend the time with those kids to basically learn the basics, and after they get that parental support or coach support, basically the gates open and those kids will run. So I encourage everybody to give it a shot and hope to see a lot of kids make it to World Dairy Expo at some point in their 4-H career.
Mm-hmm. You are correct, Eric. This is the last session. I'm hoping that actually we've been talking a lot about doing these kinds of things for other contests, like consumer decision making and some of those other youth contests. So likelihood of that coming forward in the next year is certainly pretty positive. I did just post a link to our NDSU Extension 4-H YouTube channel. And so I did see the livestock one come out for recording, but those other ones should follow soon. Good question. With that, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much for doing these.
You're welcome, Eric. Thanks for joining us from South Carolina.
You bet.